I would like to extend my appreciation to the Moya University for this opportunity to share with all of you, with special mention to our technical assistants and advisors, Mike, Rose, and BL, and others, and of course, all of you who have taken your valuable time to participate. We're going to pretty much follow the same protocol that we have in other presentations. And I always try to build in some recapitulation, but perhaps with a new twist, so that some of the areas we've researched and gone over can be a good prelude to additional information we're going to provide. So we will have, as we move along, many opportunities for questions and sharing. So let us begin with one of DK's key quotes. Is there anyone in the group who would like to read this quote to us?
I'll start.
Thank you.
New words and new symbols that will reveal the hidden aspect of deity. Speech is one of the keys which opens the doors of communication between men and subtler beings. It gives the clue to the discovery of those entities who are contacted on the other side of the veil. But only he who has learned to keep silent and has arrived at the knowledge of the times to speak can pass this veil and make certain esoteric contacts. Magic consists, as we are told in the secret doctrine, in addressing the gods in their own language. Therefore, the speech of average man cannot reach them. Therefore, those who seek to learn the occult language, those who yearn to become aware of the words which will penetrate to the ears of those who stand on the other side, and those who seek to utilize the formula and phrases which will give them power over the builders, have to unlearn their previous use of words and to refrain from ordinary methods of talking. Then the new language will be theirs, and the new expressions, words, mantras, and formulas will be entrusted to their care.
Excellent. Thank you, BL. We know that when DK refers to subtler beings, he's not only referring to advanced initiates and the masters, but also the Deva and angelic realms that are approached more through geometry, color, and sound than words. Although there are certain sacred mantras and words of power that can also facilitate this. So let us move on and sort of recapitulate a little bit what we discussed and actually discussed at all of our presentations around the theory of triangles. I did a little research and I found that there was roughly 128 references to the vortex and the funnel within the Tibetan's works. And he uses other words to describe the vortex and the funnel, but these are the primary ones. In describing the first esoteric triangle for meditation, the disciple must according to the Tibetan, create a triangle of force between the 12-petal lotus, the ajna center, and the heart center in this way. This is in reality more in the nature of a funnel of receptivity than a triangle. Once again, and I apologize for being repetitive, but we have to understand that the potency and power of triangles starts with linking to 3 individuals, 3 different energy sources, and seeing the energy circulate. And when that energy is circulating and free flowing, it will become a vortex. And a vortex has the power to pull. And we're going to get into this as we move along, exactly how the vortex and the sphere and the triangle all work as a composite. Now, we've been told that there are different stages of development: the personality, the soul, and the monadic levels. Visually, you can see with the number 1 at the top, this green mass of swirling energies that is very incoherent. That is prior to the aspirant aligning themselves with the ageless wisdom teachings or personal integration and growth, which is really guided by the soul, but the soul does not reveal itself till much later. So we see in number 2, second one down from the top, a series of squares. And we've discussed this extensively. If your auric field, the auric field of your group, and particularly the planet, are dominated or populated by squares, it doesn't create the purification, the power to expel inimical forces. Now, again, these inimical forces can be personally seen as your own karma. They can be seen as the karma of your group, and they can be seen as the karma of the logos. And that's why, excuse me, our planet is not considered fully sacred at this point, because it has not been able to go from stage 2 to stage 3, which is where with the blue sphere you become soul aware. And once again, the triangle is bisected by a line that now reveals twice the potency for the individual, for the group, and for the logos to maintain its sovereignty and not be overly influenced by negative energies outside of its auric field. In other words, on an individual level, can each person who's participating in this group actually say with certainty that if you're experiencing some type of difficulty or negative energy, oh, is that coming from me, A? B, is it coming from my family? C, is it coming from the group I'm a part of? Or is it just extraneous negative energy that the planetary logos is dealing with? And we may never know entirely, but we do know that when you enclose your different auric fields, your different sheaths, your different centers with powerful triangles of light, they not only nurture the light within the organism, but they protect it. And then, of course, once you've reached the third initiation, at the third phase, the blue sphere, you begin to move into monadic fusion, and then it becomes almost like a spherical life that is perfectly organized, and expressed. I love this little quote from the stanzas of Duane, where the Tibetan says, "The great and cruel Maya of the plains of sweet illusion come into being, draws into its snare the point of unconnected light and dims their luster." That is sort of an intuitive, poetic way of stating what I just did on a more technical level. You cannot be drawn into any snares if your light is bright and your triangles are tight in your auric field. Now here's a similar but slightly different representation. On the left, we have a loose grid of squares open to the entry of undesirable forces. The next one to the right, the triangles, is where you achieve perfect health. And you have in your auric fields power. And rather than sucking in like a loose grid of squares, the triangles push out. They like, and then if you follow to the third diagram to the right, this grid can become so tight, it becomes just one sphere. And there's some few technical points here you can read as we skip through this, but I'm not going to dwell on it too long because we've been over this before, perhaps not with the same identical images. And here is a symbol or a diagram that shows sort of a lot of these things I've just shared brought together into a composite. You have the major inlets and outlets, and that's the planetary logos work, drawing in energies from the sun, the other planets, and outer constellations. They come down through the major inlet at the top, they circulate down through, and then they make their exit at the bottom. And they bring the redemptive energies, fires, and forces that give strength to the planetary logos and all of her subsidiary ashramic outposts presided over by different masters of different rays. And if you go right to the center, you can see what we have here called the physical grid of electric light. As odd as it may sound, the spread of electricity according to DK and light on the physical plane, the light right in your own home, right in on your own street, cities, even though they can become congested and demonstrate undesirable qualities, this lightedness is actually a part of the evolutionary development of humanity. And we're going to get into electricity in greater detail a little further down our presentation. And then you see the outer shell, the etheric grid of lighted substance. You have the physical grid, which is the result of the etheric grid, which is the result of the grid the masters and the new group of world servers and those who do triangles have created. And this is what links the macrocosm, the logos, to us personally, right here, sitting, listening to me pontificate. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this image up, but I'm going to open it. I'm going to open the group to any shares or questions that they may have since this is a very superficial presentation in many respects, but in others, it can be quite revelatory if you're not that aware of the more esoteric side of triangles. Yes, here's Diana with the question, do the aurora borealis have to do with the entrance and exit of the planetary vortex? Absolutely. That is the visible demonstration of this lighted substance that I'm referring to. And some of it is the result of the radiation of the planet Earth, but most of it is actually coming from other levels and other dimensions, because what you see with the aurora borealis visually is actually only an outer demonstration of very powerful forces that cannot be fully understood until you have developed that type of intuition or psychic sensitivity. Are the North and South poles the only entries and exits? And other people feel free to add to these questions your take on this, because this is a vast subject. Are the North and South poles the only entries and exits? No, they are the two major portals. There are many others. When you look at the image where it says etheric grid of lighted substance, you have these pentagons and tetragons that have these red lines and these red dots. Those are actually lesser portals. And wherever you find a master in incarnation, you will often find them working near one of these portals. And again, the portal is an entry and a place of exit. And then you break it down from the groups. All esoteric groups are portals. And yes, they try to link to the best of their ability with the master's portal to the planetary logos secondary portals, but it comes right down because each one of these portals connects with one of your chakra sheaths or spiritual bodies. So this is visually the demonstration of as above, so below. That man, study thyself, because when you can become aware of which centers are active in your development, where you are on the spiritual path, you will know the right scientific meditation, visualization for you to do for maximum development. Doesn't mean what you're doing now is not working. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means there's ways to refine it so that the highest plays upon the lowest. Are these triangles actually tetrahedrons in 3D? Yes, absolutely. They're also pentagons, and you can't possibly put that in one image, but we have shown that in other animations, and we're going to show it again in animations that are coming up. Yes, would a sacred
Duane,
planet, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Heidi's had her hand up for a little bit.
Well, please.
Go ahead, Heidi.
I was just wanting to acknowledge that also I wanted to acknowledge that that telepathic mental grid is present in the, picking up the higher vibratory energies that are needed at the deeper levels, and also that feeds all the way into the elements and the elemental level, which is to me where the deeper core levels are. And so it shows that microcosm and macrocosm as it's working together in this depiction.
Excellent comment. Yes, if we are working together as a group properly, this will happen in different stages automatically. If I am here simply to impart a lot of technical information, then I have miserably failed in my high mission, because all the quotes, which can be tedious, and all the fifth ray that I throw into this is very important only as a base. And as Heidi has pointed out, and all of you have seen that here in these presentations, our ability to mentally fuse more and more each session, and maybe perhaps small increments, so that we begin to think on higher mental levels simultaneously. Now, that's not to say we have to all come to the same conclusions, nor that we all need the same thing, but there's more to these presentations than just a lot of glitzy artwork and a lot of technicalities. So thank you, Heidi. That's a very important statement. Is there a source of info actually showing the local of these lesser portals? Yes, and a lot of these different links show variations of this, and I'm not so sure they're all correct. But if you go to Dan Shaw's site, he is big on the vortex. I worked with him when I was living in Ashland, Oregon, and he's very bright, and he does present some really key insights. Now, we also know the Tibetan has also mentioned certain key areas, and I'm not going to go over them because that would be a presentation in itself. But whether it's New York or Geneva or Tokyo, they all are inlets for certain types of force. Okay, excellent. Any additional comments?
Yeah, the one above Susie's there was from Diane. It was the one you started to read when I said Heidi's hand was raised. It's from Diana.
Okay.
The question is, would a sacred planet have a larger number of major vortices?
Yes. However, we have to always remember, and this may sound a little contradictory, that it's not always the number as it is the potency. In other words, a number of smaller vortices can, like bubbles floating on the surface of water, they can come together and create a big bubble. In other words, when you reach the end of development and you're working with soul and particularly monadic awareness, you will have synthesized many of the lower triangles into bigger triangles, and then the bigger triangles, which are vortices, into the sphere, which might become one living monadic organism with its inlet and outlet. Its inlet being energy from cosmic sources coming in and then passing down through the outlet at the bottom vortex down to all of the material planes that it is destined to work with in that cycle. Good question.
And then
Go ahead.
Michael Stacy's, might we be able to relate the two grids with the Van Allen belt, which are the two bands of radiation surrounding the Earth?
Yes. And I would say that my research into this part of the teachings is limited, but wherever there is matter, wherever there is energy, there is something behind it, giving it life so that we can see it, whether it's electronically, magnetically, or even visually. So, okay, excellent. Thank you, Michael. Does this electric grid of triangles encapsulate the darker lower elementals plaguing the planet? Well, the squares are the darker elementals. and they are involutionary in nature, and they're sort of like a group of unruly children that have never been disciplined. They want direction. They don't want to be confined to darkness, but that's all they've known. And they're afraid of the light. They're afraid of moving forward. So they will do anything to keep things the way they are. And when you take a square and draw a line diagonally across, what you have done is you have at that moment redeemed the prisoners that have been held down for a lack of stimulation, for a lack of a saving force to come to its aid. And this is probably one of the keynotes of the occult path. And that is all this work, however grimy and difficult and painful it is at one time or another, it's because you're taking aspects of your lower nature and you're subjecting them to repolarization, electrification, and the stewardship of now a greater force. And DK summarized it in this way. He said, the devas in the angelic kingdoms fall into three different departments, although there's many variations of these departments. The first one is the elementals we must learn to control. Second group, the devas that we need to learn to cooperate because they work on soul levels. And then third, the devas that have been liberated and we must learn to obey them. So it's curious. You have the lower you want to redeem, but you have to be passive and open to the higher because it's what flows through us that creates transmutation, transmission, transfiguration, or however you want to use it. It's not us personally, although we are instrumental karmically of making this whole thing work. It's opening and allowing those forces into our lives. So the electric grid of triangles will assimilate the darker lower elementals and steer them towards the light. But remember, one of the difficulties of the mystical path, and this is not always true, that the mystic often wants to get away from the crud, get away from the pain, from the difficulty. And once away, they can sever their ties with the lower planes. Whereas the occultist has the same motivation to get out of the grunge, out of the pain, out of the suffering, but simultaneously, to quote DK, turn, as the Bodhisattva vow says, on that pedestal of light, particularly powerful in Capricorn, and shine it into those areas that we don't want to leave. If you are a woman, or if you are parents who have given birth to a child, you don't abandon it because it has unruly habits. You work with it, you nurture it, you realize it's only a question of time, and time is on our side. Okay, excellent. I'm going to
You got one more there from Susie.
okay, one more. Excellent.
It might be interesting to apply the info you are enlightening us with here to the squares and triangles in our esoteric astrological charts.
Absolutely. I am no esoteric astrologer, but I have learned a few things working with Michael for 40 years. Squares, as an example, are places in your chart where there's tension. And that tension can be very uncomfortable, but it's redemptive, because when you see where the limitation or the karmic liability lies, you can apply the soul light through trines and direct relationships in other parts of the chart, coming from the soul, coming from the master's ashram, and you can use it to your advantage. There are no bad charts, period. There is only unrecognized opportunity. And the worse the chart looks, sometimes the more opportunities you may have if you choose to take advantage of it.
Can I
Okay.
just add something
You
here?
certainly can, BL.
Number one, I love what you just said. And then the other thing is when you look at those squares and the trines in your chart and you look at the major configurations, what you'll find is that the squares are the school of hard knocks. That's the lessons that you're learning on, and the trines are the benefits that you've already learned. And if you lay them over each other, what you're going to find many, many times is that the trines are there to help you work with the squares, whether it be through um, a direct hit on the same planet in there anywhere, or um, whether it's some other relationship between them. But any relationship, any aspect between any points in your chart are that opportunity to do something with it.
That's excellent, PA. Thank you.
And James says squares and oppositions give us energy to work with. Without them, we lack motivation. Sure. I always think of them. I always think of them as that swift kick in the pants that
I love
gets
it.
us to change the status quo. But there's a purpose in them, and the purpose of the squares and the purpose of the oppositions is not always negative. There's good in every aspect. It's how we see it and how we take that opportunity. Okay, I'm off my high horse.
No. That is very, very important information, because as we move through these series of presentations, we are going to get more and more into esoteric astrology. And I am convinced from what AAB has said that at 2025 and approaching 2025, like we are now, and obviously afterwards, we are going to have a new presentation in the astrological field. And it may not simply be more technical information, which is very important, meditative techniques, visualizations, but it may be in how we see these symbolically or graphically or in animations, because they have certain concepts are so difficult through the spoken word. One animation can suddenly just like light right up your higher mind or your intuition, and you say, wow, I get it. Okay, excellent.
Okay, that generated some more comments.
Okay, that's all right. We can deal with them.
Wait a minute. I got lost in them already. Okay, Mary says, thank you so much for that comment on esoteric astrology. I will use this with students. Your words are a blessing to future generations' work. Yeah, it's all about perspective, and that's what Duane is trying to point out here, and in my way, I am too. James says too many trines may lead us expecting all the gore. Exactly. Those are the things that we fall back on that we find too easy. That's why we need that swift kick in the pants of the squares. Susie says, beautiful to both of us. And James says, I like it when a chart has a lot of all aspects. When squares plus oppositions almost equal the sum of sextiles and trines, conjunctions can pivot either way. Sure, they're all working. It's dialogues. I'm sorry, Duane. This is my area, but
No, we want
the
you to.
chart. Yeah, okay. The chart is like a big extended family. We don't always get along with Uncle Bill, and we're tight with Cousin Ann. But it's the dynamics of all of that put together that we learn to work with. And that's what our chart does. It teaches us how to do that. Because no matter what happens astrologically or in that big honkin' dysfunctional family, we always are going to have events, family events, transits or whatnot, that put everybody in play.
Excellent. It is a group experiment, and that is so important. Thank you, BL. Dane Rudia is an excellent source to help us understand these geometric dynamics. Yes, Dane Rudia, he is just fabulous. In fact, I was reading him before I got exposed to the Tibetan. So he helped me make that transition. Alan Leo and Dan Rudia and a few others. Okay, excellent. Now, what we see here is the throat.
1 second.
Yes,
May I comment on Dane Rudger?
please.
That I forget the exact name of the book, the one with all the Sabian symbols where he explains it.
Awesome.
Yeah, and part of what's awesome, it's not just the symbols, but he goes through explaining how every single part of a circle, the degrees, are transitioning to the next one. And it's like, it's an amazing tour de force to go through that much detail. If you read that whole book, you not only understand the Sabian symbols, but how a cycle, no matter what kind it is, has all of those progressions and how the energy goes from all the major and minor aspects as it goes through the circle. It's like nothing else I've ever seen that explains all the parts of the astrological circle.
Excellent. Appreciate that comment, and it's so true. Okay, so what we see here.
I put the
Go
book
ahead.
in the remarks. Sorry. It's
No,
Dane
please
Rudger
do.
and Astrological Mandala. And then the subtitle is The Cycle of Transformation, and it's 360 symbolic phases. So that's the book he's talking about. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, excellent. So what we see here as we move along with this triangle work is the throat of a vortex. Now, if this vortex is spinning at high speed, it's going to be like a blur, and it's just going to look like circular rings. But at its base, at its foundation, it's all triangles, each attempting to link with another, because salvation comes not by linking with something good and creative and beautiful, but by linking and sharing simultaneously. Now, this is a image directly from the last volume on the 7 rays. And it demonstrates graphically the vortex, the funnel. And we can see the AUM symbolizes, starting from below up, matter, the M, U, the soul level, and A, the monadic level, or the way of the higher evolutions. Now, DK says a lot about AUM and OM, and it would take way too much time to get into that in detail. But the key insight here is that you first have to have a material base. In white magic, in alchemy, you always have to have a container, because you can create very high energy, but if you don't know how to create a container for that, and this goes into the creation of thought forms, another important subject, it will just dissipate. So the material vortex, symbolized by the bottom one, the M, it puts forth its contribution. It is a type of light. And this relates to the little elementals, those little unruly children that are part of our nature. The soul descends, but at the same time, in a very peculiar sense, it emerges like the petals on a flower or another vortex coming out of that vortex. And then out of the soul vortex, symbolized by the U, the consciousness, the light of the Christ, emerges the will aspect, which is the last vortex that where it sort of contracts into a single line, and then the circle at the very top becomes the point. So Alice Bailey, I personally believe, was attempting to the best of her ability and with the students that she had that could help her with these different graphs and tabulations to make them more three-dimensional, but not easy to do under the limiting historical circumstances of a world war and all the stuff that she had to go through. Okay, so now what you're seeing is just one vortex. It's inverted, it's a cone, and we have inside that vortex, which is swirling at high speed, we have a triangle. And the triangle gets its potency because it's linked on 3 different levels, or with 3 different potencies, or 3 different individuals or groups, or planets astrologically. Ray 3, symbolized by the green at the bottom. Ray 2 to the left with the blue, consciousness, love aspect. And then Ray 1 at the upper right, symbolizing the will aspect. So here's a cone where, seen in a stationary form, it has a geometry because it has stopped rotating for our benefit. But we're going to see what this looks like when it's rotated at high speed a little later in the presentation. So when we go to the next image, you see 3 cones. And this is just sort of a duplication of the earlier one, only we've added the 3 different levels differently. See, we're starting to break it down and get a little more fifth ray here. Here's the 3-fold onto Corona Bridge. There's a major triangle that the personality has to purify, 3 lower vehicles. The soul, it expresses 3 qualities of will, love, and intelligence. And then the monad, 3 qualities of cosmic love, cosmic will, and cosmic intelligence. And if you took this and you contracted it together and made it and see the vortex, that one vortex connecting into a sphere, you would see, and we're going to try to duplicate that in another slide. And here you also see the centers. Now they're not calibrated with the right petal formation, but they can give you an idea visually that the chakras and their respective petals, that triangles and their respective placement in different levels, and the vortex make up one living organism. But that one living organism is very difficult to discern until, like a musical instrument that you just separate. I can't quite remember the instrument. An accordion. Our lives, our disciplines, our movement forward through initiation is like we're an accordion that's separated with all these bifurcations. And as we go through an initiation, the master magician, the logos or the solar logos, is contracting that in. Its pralaya is slowly taking place. And when it gets completely folded back into itself. The Manvantari has done its complete cycle. It's gone through around its 360-degree multidimensional cycle, and it's back into the nothingness and the no one, the unborn, the uncreated. Okay, now we're coming up to our first animation, and then we're going to have questions and shares afterwards. This is the definitive quote by DK that supports a lot of what I have been sharing. In other words, I've had some students of the Alice Bailey teachings rightfully challenge me on a few key points that I've shared. And I was disappointed I couldn't find the quote. And maybe this is just my glamour, but a quote from the master, a fifth degree master, gives validity to all the other things that I have said, because this is not anything original of mine. Trust me. Some of the artwork is original, I guess you could say, but it is extracted from Blavatsky, Bailey, even Rudolf Steiner, a lot of different people, and often put into what appears as my own words. Okay, in the whirling of the force through the vortex, which whirling forms the petals of the lotus, it will be observed that certain petals predominantly stand out. So depending on the triangle and its speed and how it whirls down through the vortex, certain petals will begin to form. And I wish I could say that I animated this next image. I did not. I simply found it. I don't know who did it, but it's utterly profound, because this next image is showing you, and we're going to see the animation, what you see as vaguely petal formations. But these petal formations are the result of two different types of energies meeting, and as they circle around themselves, each trying to cancel out the other, this is how the vortex is created, and this is how
My
the
question is, what happens when you have sex? Does it increase your chakra or spiritual awareness?
Okay, I'm sorry. I had a trend of thought. Please repeat that a little more slowly, and I'll be happy to share it. Please
It's quite a
repeat.
simple question, you know. When you
It
have
is.
sex, does it increase or spiritual awareness or chakra?
Yes, the more petals that you have indicates the more energies you're
No,
working
no,
with.
no, 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 no. I already have all the petals.
Rose, I'm going to let Rose handle this question, or somebody in the group, because I'm
Man,
missing it.
this guy is not spiritual awakened. This guy should be spiritually awakening during this process of healing and understanding. It's quite easy to understand, so.
Excellent. Well, thank you for understanding it, because that's what we need to do. So going back to my statement, when two or more energies come into each other's vicinity, they do not cancel each other out in the early stages. They turn upon themselves. They rotate. You can see this in weather systems. When two different weather systems meet, they cause this rotation in the atmosphere, excuse me, and what is created is a vortex. On spiritual levels, it's the same dynamic, only it's a little more complicated, and each number of petals indicates a different life a different organism in its level of advancement. That's why the base of the spine, when we study the individual human chakra system, only has 4 petals. The astral center, 6, and on and up to the heart center and the ajna and the different other levels. So what we're going to see next, and then I'm going to open it up to the group, is how the vortex creates the petals. Or you could say how the petals are an intimate part of the vortex and they work symbiotically. And in the middle of this, and it only happens at certain speeds, in the very middle of this, you'll see these little shooting darts of electricity going back and forth. That is these 2 different types of energy that create the chakra trying to neutralize each other. They're trying to bring harmony and peace and stability to something that is dynamic and rotating. Okay. So let me just say that before we open this to any comments, this music was by Duder, and I think it was called Temple of the Gods. Beautiful, beautiful, transformative music. And keep in mind that you're only looking at a side view of a sphere, and that if we stopped this rotating vortex with the petals, and you note that the petals only form at certain junctions, that you don't see always just the petals. They shift and they change because the energies are mutating. And if you froze one of these frames and you created from the triangles, from the tips of the petals, triangles, you would be able to see how, again, we go from triangles into the vortex. Okay, I'm going to open it up for any sharing or questions.
What James says, Two energies combining remind me of the two galaxies colliding and combining.
Yes. What happens with us microcosmically is actually the result of something similar, only more powerful and dynamic on a higher level. And the two have to be brought together. That's actually one of the keynotes of astrology, meditation, esoteric healing, and a lot of other related areas. Simply building a bridge, or if you prefer, clearing away, as Jung or Rumi would say, the debris that we have karmically created between ourselves, our souls, the master's ashram, or our creator. Any additional comments?
Yes, we've got a hand. Heidi, go ahead, please.
I just want to acknowledge the beauty that comes together in those interactions, and it comes through that harmonization of what you showed earlier in a more technical depiction, but that harmonics that actually is invoked through those energies coming together, meeting like a spark and then receding back away. So it's a constant motion of coming together and then relieving itself. So it's in constant transformation. It's not stagnant at all. There's nothing stagnant about that. And of course, for those lower energies of the square, they're fearful of that because they don't exist the way that they have existed before, and they are what's transforming. Those elemental energies are what's transforming. And I think most of the time people are identified personally with that form, and it's not really it's not personal. It's a very transitory process. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because it kind of came through in the beauty and the harmony of the music and the visual that you put forth.
Excellent. Thank you, Heidi. Beautifully shared. We have to always keep in mind that the symbols in the animations can often be considered undiscovered aspects of ourselves, and that when we find truth, beauty, harmony in any of this occult or esoteric work, it's just mirroring what is within us. And it's peculiar. We often, in the early stages of this work, have to withdraw, move away from certain aspects of our nature, our lower nature. But in reality, that really is a movement towards something bigger, bolder, brighter, and more beautiful. And as I've said many times in other presentations, it's not about sacrifice, if you go by the common definition, giving up something for something less. It's, to quote the Tibetan, you're taking over that which is more beautiful, more truthful, more powerful, and thereby that which was earlier hindering dies of attrition. It doesn't die because we beat it into submission. It doesn't die because we've overanalyzed it 10,000 times too many. It dies because we have taken our attention off of it and onto the soul light and the service that the soul light inspires us to initiate. Any additional comments?
Yes, go ahead, please, James, and then I'll get to the chats. James.
Okay, there. Did we miss the comment by Susie Miller at 11:44 a.m.?
What time zone?
Well,
I'm sorry.
could you read us her comment? We don't want
I
to miss
got it.
anybody's. Okay, please.
Thanks, James. She says, interesting that even in the aspect of the numerical values of the AUM, we have 135, which resonates to the progression of point of power, expression of quality, and expression in manifested form.
That is very, very beautiful. There are many types of numerology with numbers, and that is one of the best. Thank you so much, Susie. And thank you, James, for
James.
bringing that to our attention.
Okay, and then Anna says, on the individual level, oops. On the individual level, it is continuous process of incarnations, taking the body in order to serve the redeeming purpose of the soul, Logos, Creator.
Beautiful. Yes, we, until the third initiation, are prisoners of the planet. And to some degree or another, and each initiation frees the student, the aspirant, the disciple from that which it has hindered. First initiation, the desire body. And again, it doesn't mean that you can't have desires. It just means your desires do not dominate your personality or your life. Second initiation, the astral plane, the emotions. Doesn't mean you can't have a bad day or go through a day and have some negative emotions, but it does mean that you're not dominated by negative emotions. Third initiation, you've mastered and created the bridge between the lower mind and the higher mind, because that is when you move into the upper triad of the soul, which is a reflection of the monadic triad, where you experience will, love, and higher intelligence. And that in those higher levels even have their rings past not, or limitations, but not as we usually understand the term. So thank you, Anna. That's excellent.
And then Susie says, sorry for her comment that I just read on Om. She says the M, quality of 4, form.
Okay. I could see 4 fitting as well. The moving numbers, this is what Proclus said in one of his powerful statements, the philosopher. He said, only the moving numbers create the real thing. And that's sort of a paradox. We think of a number as something stable, something fixed, but numbers are, in their more esoteric form, representations of moving energies. Excellent, Anna. That was a great statement, and it's so true. And I've often thought it initiation and the path, and this may be an oversimplification, but it feeds into my mindset that imagine you're going through a grammar school, grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, and whatever, and you have just emerged out of the second grade, and now you're in the third grade. But before you can graduate from the third grade, you have to have spent time with those who are still in the second grade to orientate them and direct them to what they're going to experience, what they're going to expect. And there should always be this interconnecting teaching modality. Okay, so I'm just showing just here a few more visual representations of what we've seen as the vortex and the sphere. This would be like looking above down.
Wayne,
And yes,
sorry, before you start on this, we've got a couple more comments. And
okay, excellent.
I was on mute. I didn't realize it. Okay. Francis says, Om, Aum, the universal creation of energy, force, and substance.
Excellent.
And then Joe says, I am reminded with the last depiction, the reversal of the astrological wheel, the move from Scorpio to Libra, and reversal at this point to movement counterclockwise. The center, which I take to be the monad, is interestingly darkening to a deep blood red.
Yes, that's an important insight that at the third initiation, the wheel is reversed and we now go counterclockwise. And that wheel is a vortex. And you can actually have two vortexes operating at the same time. One isn't created, then it's dusted off, and then you step into another one. The older one dissipates in its potency, and then the higher one eventually dominates it. And okay,
And then
excellent.
we have one more comment from Maria. She says, concerning the comment on the A, U, and the M and the 135, that the 135 can be viewed as a progression of the Fibonacci series.
Excellent in sacred geometry. That's perfect.
Okay, I think we got, oops, we got a
Okay.
hand. Go ahead, James. James? Well, James' hand went up and then it went down. And you moved to the next slide, but you didn't finish. You just barely started talking about.
Okay, we shall.
Oh, James needed to be unmuted. Hold on a minute.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine.
Yes. Thank you. For years, I've had this image of an astrological circle, a zodiac. And when you get from 29 Pisces to 0 Aries, you go up or down to another circle, like a big spiral, like a big slinky. Is that image, does that relate to something in terms of maybe going from lifetime to lifetime or something similar?
Yes, absolutely. One of the least explored areas of cosmic fire, and I can understand why, because it's a weighty, weighty book mentally. It talks about the three fires and it talks about the three types of motion. And rotary motion, which is just something spinning around and around, symbolizes the personality level or the material plane. The next movement is cyclic spiral, and that symbolizes the consciousness or the love aspect of deity. And this is a major progression from something that just spins around in a circle to something that becomes a vortex, and it's a living, vibrant vortex that has an upper part and a lower part and is a part of a sphere. So we're looking at spheres within spheres, and we're going to explore that a little further. Yes, so that was a wonderful comment. Thank you. Okay, any additional comments before we go to the next?
Mary's got her hand up.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mary.
Hello, I'd like to ask a question continuing on James.
Yes.
Could it be that not only 29 degrees of Pisces, but could it be that many entry and exit points are possible in the will, depending on the race of the
Absolutely.
monad, personality, or soul?
Absolutely. There is a mathematical formula that includes color, sound, and geometry that does exactly that. And this is technically and intuitively, which can happen simultaneously, how the master assess the student's development. They can see the entry points and the exit points. They can see where they've come from and where they are, but where they're going, because they're already there where the disciple or even the lesser initiate is attempting to scale or penetrate. So there's nothing more valuable than asking directions from somebody to where you want to go who's just come back from there. And that's sort of a Rumi quote, where if you want to know the path ahead, if you want to know what you have to do, you can spend a lot of time listening to people that want to impress upon you how they've mastered all these different levels, but it may be just intellectual to them. It may be just endless ream of minutia. So that's why when you link into advanced disciples or initiates or masters like DK or Blavatsky and others, you're getting a lot of information that's accurate, and when linked properly, you're getting a download of their ashram. That was an excellent statement. Thank you, Mary. Okay, now we see the same thing repeated, only as a vertical fractal. We, as individuals, as a group, are situated in one incredibly large and living holistic organism called God. And it doesn't matter where you are on any one of these little beads. You can call this, as the Buddhists or the Hindus do, call it the necklace of Indra, that everything like a fractal is connected. And when one small part of this huge mosaic goes radiatory, either from above down or from below up, it simultaneously sends these shock waves of light and love and will throughout the whole system. And this is, I think, what is meant when in the Bible, and I may not get this quote exactly, somebody said, not so much as a sparrow drops that the great Lord of love or the Logos is not aware of it. And we think, oh, yeah, that's a beautiful metaphor or an analogy, but please, how can one little bird dropping off its perch have any effect on the whole? Everything is interconnected, and we are all spiraling down, up this freeway to liberation and to perfect world service. And all this mosaic of color is not done just to be beautiful and to be harmonious to look at, but to demonstrate we may be in the same group, but we might have, as Mary just shared a few minutes ago, some unique quality astrologically, rayology, within our different groups, in our different masters' canopy. And that is part of the plan, to figure out where we fit in. And, you know, you don't have to do anything and you're going to evolve. You don't have to meditate. You don't have to pray. You don't have to serve. And you will evolve, because We are cells independently in this great logos. However, if we can understand the logos's plan and the Christ plan and the master's purpose, we can speed it up. And it just simply speeds up and pulls us away from the suffering of the lower elemental kingdoms. Each part is contained within the other. There is no separation. And it's nice to say, I'm finally free and I can do my own thing. And yes, we must honor our individual autonomy. There is no separation. All is one. Do all the spirals spin in the same direction? No, they spin in opposite directions, and that's what keeps them in their place. They're not just randomly thrown out there by some superior power. They come in by a mathematical formula that's electrical. Unless,
Dwayne,
yes,
sorry,
go ahead.
you skipped over a couple of comments.
Okay,
Dwayne says, and this was, I mean, James, and this was in reference to your previous slide. He says, as you zoom in to a part of the fractal, you see the whole contained in each part, like a hologram.
like a hologram. We are a small hologram of a greater hologram. That's excellent. Thank you.
He also says that he's glad that he will keep evolving even when he feels like a brat.
Yes, absolutely.
That's all part of the process.
Exactly. And we need not to waste time, but not to force that which is largely organic in nature and is happening irrespective of what we do day to day. And I know that sounds like the antithesis of sort of what I'm been sharing for all these different months, even years, but it's not. It's proportion, it's balance. Never push yourself when you're not ready, but always be ready for the new, the creative, and the opportunity. That's what is meant by being a lion of God. It's nice to be a lamb of God. It's the second ray. It's the passivity and the beauty of the love vibration. But we have to bring into that or unfold with that love vibration the will of the Father, the principle of purpose, which lies behind the Christ consciousness and even love itself as we understand it. Another image, if there aren't any additional comments.
No, that's it for right now.
Okay, another image shows here the downpouring from higher levels into an elongated sphere. These spheres, of which I have referred to, don't necessarily always have to be perfectly round. They can be elongated vertically or horizontally. And this is just the impact from higher levels coming down and being absorbed by a number of lesser lives. But as we can see, these lesser lives, like the fractal before it we just shared, they're all like this tenuous lighted substance. They have their own independent space, but they're all connected. Each life that the personality leads to or leads is at the close represented by some geometric figure. And I've shared this quote, so I'm not going to read it other than just paraphrase it and say, we on the inner planes are seen in our own geometric form based on some aspect of the triangle. There may be a few squares that need to be traversed into triangles. There may be a little adjustments here and there, and all of us are different. And the Tibetan summarizes this by saying, the master is he who has blended all the lines of fivefold development first into the 3 and then into the 1. The 6-pointed star becomes the 5-pointed star, the cube becomes the triangle, and the triangle becomes the 1, whilst the 1 at the end of the greater cycle becomes the point in the circle of manifestation. And here is my interpretation of that in a very limited and cursory way. You sort of have, as a composite, most of what the Tibetan just said, with a few added additions of my own. And without going into a lot of time, this is sort of my mandala that I'm working on and have no doubt much progress to make. Each part of it is, and again, images are only vague representations of these inner geometric forms that are always morphing and developing into new and creative things. Grasping the intimacy of the entire pattern. Owing to the constant movement everywhere inherent in the solar system, in the zodiac, onward, interior, and revolving, some idea can be grasped of the intricacy of the entire pattern. A further aid to the grasping of this essential beauty of coordinated and organized movement and its power to qualify and condition the entire universal pattern can be gained by those students who have studied somewhat the various triangles to be found in the etheric body of man through the interrelation of the 7 centers to which I have referred elsewhere in my various books. Again, as above, so below. What's happening on cosmic levels, solar levels, is happening with us down here. This is a simple example astrologically of what DK just stated. We have 12 signs of the zodiac, and we're given in the little dots and the numbers, the color of the ray and the rays which each zodiacal sign works through. But look at the inner center, all that fairy-like weaving of warp and woof, as HPB would say, like that is the fabric of creation, because every one of these astrological signs has multiple triangles linking each to each other. Now, granted, in the study of esoteric astrology, it's broken down into very small and pockets that are easy to assimilate, and I'm just showing symbolically here. But it's a web of interconnected light. And as it rotates on the higher levels, it becomes the vortex, and then the vortex eventually ends in a point of pure nothingness. And another point the Tibetan makes in the quote, that there really are only 6 astrological signs, because in astrology, as you advance, and I appreciate BL's comments because they're giving us so much additional insight into that important science, that you have to synthesize your polar opposite astrologically. Let's just say, and I'm just generalizing here, this can relate to a lot of other levels, but let's just say you're born as a Cancer. Okay, to really progress on a soul level, you have to begin to synthesize not only the teachings and the trials of Cancer, but Capricorn, because they really make up only one sign. And these 2 polar opposites come together at an advanced stage of the path. And then later on, and I hope to be able to share this with this group, what is called the triple sun meditation, where you actually have 3 astrological charts that can be superimposed one upon the other to give like a tunnel view or vision of not only where you are and what you're working with in this incarnation, which is one chart, but the chart of the soul and what you're moving towards. And when that has been somewhat mastered, then you will have the chart of the monadic life superimposed over it. So you really have three charts: personality chart, soul chart, and monadic or upper triadic chart. BL, would you like to share anything at this point?
Yes, I want to go back before the triple suns
Okay.
and talk about, when you were talking about the opposites, that's one of the lessons of a disciple, is to balance polar opposites and work from the middle. Okay. And what that teaches us is, as you said, it's really one line. It's two sides of the same coin. There's a bunch of different ways you can look at it, but it's one entity, that Cancer Capricorn. Um, it's our sun, but then it's also the position of our earth, which is just as important, not only in the triple sun analogy that you were just talking about as the monadic point, but it's also a grounding for those of us who aren't yet to the monadic possibility. It's a point of grounding for us, and it's also a point of service for us. So that's important in the Sun Earth axis, but we have all kinds of other axes within our chart. We have the nodal axes, we have the ascendant descendant axis, we have any planets that might be opposite each other that form an axis. And in fact, every single axis in the chart can be, has to be balanced, has to be merged. But then let's go a little beyond the axes in the chart, okay? Because the point that he tells us is that we not only merge, say, the Aries Libra axes and the Cancer Capricorn axes, but then we learn to work from that cross in the middle of the hub, not being at any of the extremes, but being totally balanced. And then you add the other two crosses to it. And so you're totally balanced with all 12 signs into the 6, with all crosses into that hub. So it becomes the 6, and then it becomes the 3 of the hub, and then it becomes the 1 of the entire hub. So that's all part and part. The balancing of the axis is usually done with disciples and at the time of the second initiation, and working towards the center and the full balance at the hub, where you can then go, whatever energy you need, you can go to that particular spoke from the hub. That's part of the third initiation.
Excellent. And we need this clarification, BL. I'm going to give a very, very simple explanation of when I was younger and how I came to the idea of the importance of polar opposites. I was born in the sun sign Cancer, and I had three older brothers, and one of them, who was like a second father, was a Capricorn, and my dad, he was a Capricorn. And when I was quite young, maybe 14, 15 years old, I had been, through my mother's influence, been exposed to astrology just very superficially. And I used to say to myself, there's something wrong here. I am so opposite almost everybody in my family. I was sort of artistic, withdrawn, overly sensitive, typical Cancer. And Capricorn, oh my God, they were so opposite. They were so mental. They were so first ray. And I used to say, God couldn't possibly exist, because if God existed, he would not have put me in this family because we do not understand ourselves at all. Okay, years click by, and as I got out of my teenage years, I began to think a little deeper about these astrological influences. And I said, maybe I was born into this family of all these fiery first rate types to learn how to wield first ray energy, and certainly to build my mind up in a new and creative way. And it took years and years for me to figure out that I had something to learn from them that was very uncomfortable. But if I had not learned some of that lesson, I wouldn't even be here right now, because a lot of my nature is to be separate and to be out of the limelight and to just observe. Here, I have to be more Capricornian because otherwise it wouldn't work. And I'll let you, my beautiful listeners, be the judge of whether it's working or not. But thank you, BL. That was very, very important.
A, it is absolutely working with you. And B, that is a very good example of how you, A, have to live with what's in your own chart and recognize those polarities. And then B, what's lacking in your chart, you might find in some other way. I'll give you an example with me. The very first astrology I ever learned at my mother's knee was those dirty, rotten Scorpios. My
That's
older
funny.
brother was a handful, and he was a Scorpio, and my mother was an Aquarian. So, a little animosity there between that square. And it was an exact square. But the moral to this story is I had an older brother who was a Scorpio, and I have no Scorpio whatsoever in my chart. And I don't think I have any. Oh, actually, I might have a vertex in Scorpio and a Saturn in Scorpio, but I have no Taurus. Okay. So anyway, my older brother was that Scorpio, so I had him living with me. And unfortunately, he passed on when he was quite young. He was in his 20s. And at that point, I had met and married a man with the same friggin' birth date. So I
Wow.
was I was forced to live with a Scorpio my whole life. We're happily married. My little Leo and his Scorpio um, do work despite the square there, because there's always the higher and lower everywhere we go. But it's like you said, Duane, you get this energy from the people who are closest to you. Um, it helps you understand those things that may not be present in your own sign, in your own chart, or in who are in your chart, but you haven't been able to relate to them yet. You know, Nothing like family to smush it up into your face so that you have to learn to deal with it. So, um, okay, now I would
Excellent.
also like to say that we have a bunch of comments here.
Okay. Okay.
Um, Michael Stacy said, notice the correspondences between energies transmitted between the opposing signs. And that was, I think, before we talked a little more about that slide that you had.
Yes.
Um, Susie says, if I may, walk the talk, let us, and I paraphrase, turn a portion of our light into, as DK alluded to, concrete or crystallized light, and support what must be some considerable use of donations. Oh, thank you. To this amazing service that Duane and his helpers offer. Duane is a man of deep humility, has no knowledge of this message. In other words, it's not a paid advertisement. Bless you all. But yes, everything we do is through the Moira Federation, and it's by donations only. And I'll put a link in there on how you can donate should you wish to, because of course we do have all these expenses for putting on these platforms. But it's it's a journey of the heart, right, Duane?
Yes.
Okay, James has his hand up. So
Thank you. I wanted to, I also saw what Michael Stacy said, and I just wanted to point it out in this chart that not all the pairs of signs, but many of them have the same rays. Like Taurus and Scorpio both have 4. Virgo and Pisces both have 6 and 2, and so on. So that's just an illustration of how, yeah, those pairs of opposites are dealing with the same or similar energies.
Yes. And there are other forces operating. This is just a generic chart, but so true and excellent. Those are wonderful shares. So now we're going to move on to our next animation. And this is by far one of my favorite, but I want to show where it was inspired from. And this is a direct quote out of Esoteric Astrology, where DK is pointing out that there are 4 great constellations which have a peculiar relation to the dualities with which man has a definite evolutionary concern. These are expressed in a unique manner for humanity through Aries, Gemini, Virgo, and Scorpio. And the following diagram is descriptive of the nature of that relation. And there are a number of other diagrams that go with what DK says at the very bottom, where he says, and I have it in italics, when visualizing these diagrams, the symbol should be seen in rapid revolution. And I can't tell you how many years I struggled as an artist to try to duplicate that, and I was unable. But then James Orchid, is he here today? Is James Orchid here today? No, okay. And he is the creator of the next animation. And what that animation is these 5 constellations in relationship to the Earth in motion. In other words, what we have here is 5 triangles that make up a 5-pointed star. And interestingly, the 5-pointed star is pointing downward. And often people, they see the 5-pointed star pointing downward as a negative or undesirable symbol, because the Black Lodge often uses it, and it indicates that they're drawing all their energies mainly from the Earth level. However, in advanced astrology and esoteric study, the 5-pointed star pointing down is redemptive, because these 4 constellations pointing down to the Earth, this is how the Earth is redeemed. So there has to be the downward vortex. So everybody use this like a very short meditation, take a deep breath, and we are going to see what DK has asked us to do to see this symbol as an animation. One of the goals of this series of presentations, and I apologize for the repetition, is to take some of the works of H.P. Blavatsky and DK and make them come alive. And granted, you cannot take an energy on a higher level and totally reduce it to something visual, but you can do it to enough degree that if you're sensitive and if your spiritual psychic sensitivity and intuition is developing, it is like a cosmic drill of light that will bore right into your etheric body. And here you have the 5-pointed star with the key ray in its color symbolized in the image. And I'm going to open it up to any questions or shares.
Susie says the star recalls the symbol adopted by the Masonic women. And then I asked Susie, is that the Order of the Eastern Star? Is that the name of it? The group? I think it is. I've had some family members who were Masons, and I believe that was the...
It's used in almost all esoteric circles, disciplines, or traditions in different ways, the 5-pointed star. And in alchemy and in white magic, it's a science. And however superficial, we're trying to present it here visually. And I appreciate people's ability to receive this gift that does not come from me. It simply comes through myself and through the group, because we're creating a group dynamic here. And I love the participation. Any additional comments?
Yes, Heidi's got her hand up. Please go ahead, Heidi.
Thank you. Two things. The last diagram that you had, which was just the star in a different formation than the one you have on here. Yes, it shows to me those, if I look at it, if I extrapolate it up, I can actually see it as as two of the vortexes being lifted and pulled up in some of the other diagrams that you showed. And then the second thing is that that imagery that you gave depicts the appearance of and even the sound is that there's a vibration of sound. It creates a flash and a connection, and then it dissipates, and then there's what's an emptiness where you can't see. So it moves from something that is visual to something that is beyond what is seen through our sensory perception. So I just wanted to share those two experiences from your slideshow.
Thank you. Excellent comment.
Duane?
Yes.
James says the quintile is very subtle and a more evolved use of... Oops, wait a minute. I think he had... Okay. James says, I find value in the minor aspect of 5 called the quintile. And then he goes on to say it's a very subtle and more evolved use of the energy of the 2 planets involved. I would just like to say, as an astrologer, that I agree more with his second comment there. The quintile is a spiritual aspect in my mind, and it is its derivatives are what form the 5-pointed star. Okay, so to me that is a soul aspect. And of course, people are going to have them in their chart that may not be on soul levels yet. So you have to be able to resonate with what's in your chart. But yes, it's a much friendlier aspect. The harmony of 5 than some of the other aspects that are out there. So I just wanted to add that to what James was saying.
Excellent. Thank you,
And
James and
then
BL.
Then Janet says, oops, I lost it. I see the yods and energy moving between all of them. Yes, and the yods are important too, especially when you consider the names of it. The finger of God, or the hand of God, finger of fate. But with yods, you have an unfriendly relationship on two of the long sides, and then a friendly relationship with the sextile at the top. So while the yods are important work because it forces us to take those incongruities of those inconjuncts and learn to work with them in order to unleash that potential of the finger of fate or the hand of God. And that's what the sextile does. It gives us the opportunity to do that. And if we can do that, it's great lessons learned. Okay, but the aspects are less friendly in the yod than they are in the fifth harmonic there of the quintiles.
Excellent.
And Susie goes on to say the quintile is highly creative, adaptive expression. Yes, it is. And there's a whole bunch more comments here on that. Let me see. Susie says, many times the yod can be close to another octuple expression, the 154 degrees, the seventh harmonic. Yes, you have to be, with squares and trines, we use wide orbs. In other words, the planets can be apart a number of degrees. When you're using the quintiles and the yods, you have to use very, very tight orbs, because the difference between a quintile and an inconjunct is 144 degrees versus 150 degrees. So it's just so close, and it completely changes the nature of the aspect. So I don't want to make this all about astrology. Heidi says 5 goes with the domains of the physical, emotional, mental, relational, and etheric domain. Yes, and it's also the perfected man.
Excellent.
So, and then I've got another one here, but I need to read it first. So,
Okay.
James has his hand up. Go ahead, James.
Thank you. And for those who don't know, the yod is a sextile and 2 inconjuncts or quincunxes that form that finger. And I love thinking about signs that are quincunx to each other, because it shows some of the awkwardness between different signs, like Aries and Virgo. Aries is a fire and cardinal, and Virgo is earth and mutable. And when they look at each other, they just kind of go, huh? What are you about? And if you go through all of the signs and find each sign has 2 that they're quincunx to, it's a great exercise in thinking about how some of the strange relationships between the energies are. It's not just a major aspect. And it's good that we're talking about these minor ones too. And I just liked I like thinking of some unusual ways of looking at the astrological things, because we don't tend to emphasize them, but there's value there.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay.
Janet says they're called harmonics for a reason as well. Absolutely. And there's, a whole discipline on astrology about the harmonics of them. And the harmonics gives us the nature of the aspects. The second harmonic, the opposition; the third harmonic, the trine; the fourth harmonic, the squares; the fifth harmonic, the 5-pointed star; the sixth harmonic, the 6-pointed star. There's a seventh harmonic, the noviles. So it's a whole discipline in itself. And as Janet says, they're called harmonics for a reason, because it tells you about the harmony and or the disharmony involved, just like in music.
Yes. Okay, we're going to skip down through a few here. And I think what we're going to do is, let me see here, science of electricity. Yeah, no, we have wonderful feedback, and I'm going to just sort of conclude, and we'll have time to share just a little bit on astrology. And in astrology, we have three different types of crosses, and I'm not going to go into them extensively other than say that what we just viewed can be viewed electrically. And we'll save, I'm halfway through my presentation, but we'll save this other half for our next meeting. But let me, okay. So what we have here, I apologize, I didn't make it visual while I was speaking. You have the mutable cross. And keep in mind that if you look at the astrological signs as electrical conduits, different types of electrical substance and magnetic energy, it frames it more scientifically. And we want to get as many perspectives as possible because it's such a vast and complicated science. But what we're going to see here next is a quad of four energies operating simultaneously that create one living organism, but at the same time, they're four distinctly different lives. And when you look at this, you'll see there's major poles, like Pisces is a feminine receptive pole. Sagittarius, if you look across it, is considered more more active, more dynamic, more, I guess, masculine. And then you have the same thing with Gemini and Virgo. They keep each other in check by creative tension. And if that is not interesting enough, if you look at each individual sign, you'll notice there's a smaller plus and minus. And that indicates that each one of those signs, although designated as positive or negative, it has inherently built within it, embryonically, its polar opposite. In other words, Pisces is not just a receptive negative energy. It has inherently, if you look at it electrically, some aspect of a positive force. And same with all the other three. So when you look at this next animation that we're going to use as a meditation, imagine you are at the center of the mutable cross and that your auric field is concentric and it reaches out to include all these four astrological signs, which we will define in future presentations in more detail. And I appreciate the sensitivity of this group for allowing me to jump around, because that can be very disorientating. But this, I've sped things up just slightly. So, okay, now we're going to see this image in motion. Excellent. And we're going to end this with this last image. Every vortex, every sphere has an entry and exit for a vortex. But like the skins on an onion, they unfold. They are, I can't think of the exact words, but they permeate and interpenetrate each other with their electrical and magnetic substance. But note as you look at this, that there's a positive and negative pole to each vortex, to each sphere, but the next one is its opposite. And then the one after that is the opposite of the second one. And it's that creative tension that holds the organism, be it small and humble or some wheeling universe, together. And this is sort of like a preview of coming attractions, because in our next presentation, we're going to dive very, very deeply into the electrical nature of energy. And to keep in mind that the Tibetan has said that the most advanced science given to man, the oldest and the most advanced science given to man, is the science of esoteric astrology. But he also says in another quote and passage that the most advanced science that I have given to humanity is the study of electricity. And the study of electricity is the most modern study and approach to the ageless wisdom teachings. So hopefully we can bring those two sciences together and revelation will occur. So I think we have like just a couple of minutes if there wants to be any final comments as we unwind this wonderful meeting. Okay, if there's no last comments or additions or questions.
I just wanted to point out that this reminds me of my chemistry, organic and inorganic. And I know this applies to every scale of size out there, but it's kind of neat when you learn about how the atoms and the forces between them can combine to make molecules, and then what they can do. It's really amazing.
I see Jessica has shared a comment. It seems the animation depicted how the opposites turn of the spirals that keep the balance. Yes, that is absolutely. And Jessica, I want to thank you for coming today. We're going to be showcasing some of Walter's incredible three-dimensional work at his astrolog site. And what a joy and privilege it must be to the two of you to work together in these ancient wisdom teachings. So I just wanted to share that because I am so supportive of Walter's work, making esoteric astrology spherical, animated, where you can not only see what's happening right now, sort of in real time, if there's such a thing that's permissible here, but you can see what's coming because you can look at a chart that's spherical and you can see what's coming around the corner. And if people who study esoteric astrology can visualize all these charts spherically, well, they're far more advanced than I am. But when I look at Walter's charts, I really, really get an assist. So thank you. Okay, any last comments? Well, thank you all for coming, and
Jessica, you should be able to talk now.
Oh, I just wanted to say. Hold on.
Wait a minute.
Okay. Thank you, Duane. I just wanted to say we both support your work as well, and I'll let Walter know that that's coming.
yes,
Yes, thank you very much.
thank
the-
you. Any light, any love, any magnetism that you have received, take it into your family, into your community, and most importantly, radiate it out into the world as healing light. We have much progress to make before we are a sacred planet, but the energies are available and they're pouring down daily with more speed, and they're available. So thank you all.
I'm looking for Walter's website. Let me see if I can put that in there for you all. He does tremendous stuff. Okay. I'll be putting the recordings up pretty soon. You'll get the email tomorrow morning at dark 30 telling you that they're posted.
I posted the link to Astrolog Direct.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Jessica, astrolog. Oh, okay. I did astrolog.com and it didn't work, but you're right, astrolog.org. No wonder I got something else out of it. Thank you. Okay. I can't walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. We'll see you guys all next month on the 10th of February.